Individuals and organizations often talk about becoming leaders in their respective industries, but achieving that goal can sometimes be difficult based on the limits that they place both on themselves and the organization, often through the ways that they care for other human beings in that same organization. We'll talk about strategies to become limitless up next on this episode of the Psych, Health, and Safety USA podcast. From Flourish DX, this is the Psych, Health, and Safety USA podcast. As workplace mental health has become a global priority, there's a greater focus on addressing psychosocial hazards. Each week, we look at psychological safety from an occupational health and safety perspective. Let's talk psychological health and safety. Welcome to this week's Psych, Health, and Safety USA podcast. I'm your host, Dr. I. David Daniels, and I want to thank you for tuning in. Each week, we seek to increase awareness of the importance of psychological health and safety by learning from the lived experiences, research, and expertise of our guests, as well as advocating strategies to reduce harm and minimize vulnerability to psychosocial hazards in the American workplace. So organizational limits can become psychosocial hazards when they create stress, uncertainty, or negatively impact employees' mental well-being. And here's how. High job demands, sometimes excessive workloads, unrealistic deadlines, and constant pressure can lead to chronic stress and burnout. Lack of control. When employees have little say in how they do their work or limited decision-making authority, it can create frustration and helplessness. Poorly managed organizational change. Frequently, restructuring, downsizing, and mergers without clear communication will cause anxiety and insecurity for the folks who are involved in those changes. Unclear roles and expectations. Conflicting responsibilities or vague job descriptions can create confusion and stress. Limited support. A lack of social support from colleagues or supervisors can make employees feel isolated and vulnerable. An inadequate reward and recognition, feeling undervalued or underappreciated, can lead to demotivation and resentment. So when these factors are present, employees may experience stress, anxiety, burnout, even physical health issues. Organizations should proactively address these risks by fostering a supportive work environment, ensuring clear communication, and implementing mental health initiatives. All of these are ways to take the limits off the organization and take the limits off the people in the organization. And I have the pleasure of chatting with someone who's been doing a little work in that area, trying to help both individuals and organizations take off the shackles that have caused them to be less than they say that they want to be. So let's get the conversation started with an introduction of my guest, by my guest, in this case with this question. Who is Simmone Bowe?
Oh, thank you very much for the toughest HR interview question. So, so Simmone Bowe is an island girl with a global flair, with a zest for life, a love for people and justice and fairness, and to see people live purposefully and without limits. And so I've spent the majority of my career doing some form of that or the other, whether that was through education or through youth development in the public service, or as a learning and development specialist, a corporate trainer, an HR generalist and executive, or a consultant. So wherever my paths have taken me, those are the things that drive me and give me joy.
Absolutely. So we're going to dig into those. We're going to dig into that passion. People tend to do a better job at the things that they're really passionate about, not simply the things they're assigned to do. But before we get into that, the standard question that I asked virtually everybody, particularly first-timers, What does psychological health and safety mean to you?
For me, it means an environment where people feel free, and not free to do whatever they feel like, but free to express themselves, to express opinion, to contribute their value and their gifts, and not feel that it will be a case of retaliation or even being diminished. Sometimes when you share your thoughts and your ideas and your concepts, sometimes you're made to feel, well, oh, that was a dumb idea. And so then you don't feel safe anymore. So I really believe that it's a place where you are free to be your authentic self and to share your thoughts, your opinions, your contributions to the organization in whatever shape or form that may find itself, without fearing some negative reaction.
Yeah, absolutely. It's difficult to really, there's a it's actually pretty trendy these days to talk about, the concept of psychological safety, and we want people to bring their whole selves to work and all that. Really, that sounds really good until you actually do it and get a reaction that doesn't feel supportive to you. And it doesn't mean that the person who reacted is intending to be negative or harmful, but it's just how you take it, and how I feel about it might not be what I expected. And it's just really important that we have that open communication on both sides. It says, here's how I felt when you said or did that thing. And not in an accusatory way. Again, I don't even believe that a lot of people who come across as being quote unquote aggressive or bullying or whatever, I don't think that many of them think that's how they come across. They think that that's their style. They think that's the way it should be done. They think that that's going to work. Now, they may not be correct in all those assumptions, but I don't think that they're all just simply evil human beings.
Oh, okay. No, but I agree with you. I agree completely with you. I think some people are just not as self-aware as they should be. And sometimes because of their approach, it makes people more fearful to have the conversation and say, this is how what you did or said made me feel. So they continue to go on in this oblivious state. And then when they come up against someone who actually tells them, they're like, well, they get in defense mode because I've never heard this before. No one's ever said this to me, right? But people probably were afraid to tell you, and you encounter that quite a bit.
Right, right. Absolutely. So talk to me a little bit about what motivated you to get into the human resource biz. Because that's not one of the things that when you talk to, second and third graders, oh, I want to grow up and be an HR professional, because most of them don't really know what that means. But so what got you interested in human resources?
Yeah, like quite a few of us, I backpedaled into the profession. It was not my intent. In actual fact, growing up on an island that focuses on hospitality, hospitality became my first aim and first love. And due to other circumstances that I won't share on your show, part two maybe, I determined that I wanted to teach. And so I ended up in education first, and as circumstances would have it, I ended up at one of our uh, vocational schools that focused on hospitality, which was the school that I went to after high school. And being in that environment where now I'm teaching adults, it shifted my focus. We would go into the hotel environment, we would train the employees there. Our executive director at the time was very much into continuous learning for the staff. And so she facilitated a number of certification programs that I took part in. One was HR administration. And so I began to see this now as a profession and something that I aligned with. I loved people. I loved development. I loved just understanding law and policies and connecting it all with that employee experience. I couldn't put the language to it, but I knew that I enjoyed those experiences. And that's how I kind of backpedaled my way into the human resource profession through the specialist area of learning and development, which is a safe area, right? Because everybody loves their trainers. If you're a good trainer, people usually love the trainers. And then they start to vent and they start to tell you all of their challenges that they're having at work. And you start to become now, the data gatherer. And you start to really see, well, what are these experiences that people are having? And then you start to want to push the envelope a little bit more and say, well, what could we do about it? And so I think that was for me the draw to human resources.
Okay. And I have talked to people in HR before, and I can't say that I've talked to anyone whose HR experience came through learning and development. So you're my first one. I mean, I think that may have been a part of what people have done, but you're the first person to describe it in that way, that you started off trying to develop people and then went into HR. A lot of folks I've met that are in HR were, I did compensation, or I did, some kind of clerical related.
Office administration.
Yeah, exactly. And again, very similar stories that they kind of quote unquote backed into it. It wasn't really something that they intended to do, but it's out. You started off with this interest in developing human beings, which is that's unique. That's unique. I think it's unique to some, I should say, because I think a lot of people, at least a lot of ones that I run into, they end up in what are perceived to be higher kinds of roles, really to not really to develop other people, but to get more control and power over their own environment. So they, I want to be able to, control the environment and tell people what to do. And that sometimes, and again, I will say that I have met HR people who they don't really like people all that much. They don't. I mean, if you talk to them, they go like they're in HR, but and in some cases, part of the reason that they're there is because they got all of the things that the operations people didn't want to do. They tossed all that to HR, and HR had to deal with that. They got a little traumatized by it, and now years later, they're still carrying some of that. The person who came into their office and yelled at them because of what somebody else had did to them. You didn't do it, but somebody else did, and you have to take the brunt of that. And year after year after year, that can cause people to get a little jaded and get a little, not feel as good about being in a profession. As I look at a little bit of your background, you've been an independent consultant for over a decade. So what caused you to think you wanted to do something from an independent perspective?
Well, for me, I've always had this in and out relationship with consulting, right? And I've found consulting to be a unique perspective. So you get to lead or support organizations that are driving change. So for me, it's about change management, organization development, right? Transformation. That's what I love. From the consultant's vantage point, you have the bird's eye view. You're not caught up in the politics, right? You're independent. You're just looking at what it is and giving back. This is what I see. This is what I recommend. I'm happy to support you to get from A to B, right? And then you kind of move on and go to the next thing. So for me, I don't think I'm ADHD, but I do appreciate diverse experiences. Let me put it that way. I don't like to be bored. I don't like to be stuck in a routine. And I find that consulting gives you that experience of going from company to company and learning what they're about, understanding their values and their challenges and helping them through it. I think that that is a very necessary activity, right? And it's something, of course, that's growing in popularity, especially with people who have gained some expertise and they want to share that expertise with a bit more freedom, right? Freedom in time and the freedom to kind of earn the money that they would much, rather earn than corporate may allow, right? So I think those are the benefits for me with consultancy. And you can be an internal consultant as well, if your organization allows it, right? That you can be that person who has that independent voice and who's focused on, either process improvement or innovation or just, and even HR can function in that capacity, and department leaders can function that way because it's about training your eyes to see certain things and then to make those suggestions and recommendations to the organization. So I think it's an amazing area or niche.
You mentioned a word that I again want to dig into a little bit more. You talked about transformation, and when you hear successful groups, there's talk about change and development and transformation, all that type of thing. So, what is it that you believe is the barrier to organizations actually becoming transformational? Because people talk about it, and sometimes they talk about it for years and never really get there. And that suggests there's some sort of obstacle, some sort of barrier. So, I mean, in general, you don't have to pick a particular case, but what's some of the barriers that limit people from becoming transformational? They say they want to be. How come they can't?
Well, the first thing is you have to be willing to change. And so if you're not willing to change, you're not going to get transformation. Unfortunately or fortunately, transformation requires change. And what I've found is that you would have particularly senior leaders, they are the ones to engage you. They already recognize they've experienced the challenges. They see what's going on. They engage you, come in and fix this, but don't mess with me. Fix those other people. Those other people need fixing, not me. And so a lot of times you find that some of the things that are contributing to what needs to change in the organization are the senior leaders who actually are requesting it and requiring it, but they're not prepared. And it goes back to what we talked about earlier, the self-awareness, right? Or feeling that it's necessary. This is beneath me. Where we're at, the air is clear, right? We don't need that. Everybody else does. And so I think that is a key critical barrier to transformation happening. I think another key barrier is not planning the change properly, right? And so when I talk about planning the change, of course, there's some changes that are unplanned, unexpected, natural disasters, other things that, in your safety world that you deal with, right? But even in that, I know I have a former student who always says, when everyone was talking about the pandemic, he said, we could have planned for the pandemic. And it was a jaw-dropping moment. Like, really? We could have? Yes. Contingency planning is that, like just going through the what if scenarios, right? And so if we are embarking on a planned change, right, we know that we have to open a new location or we have to change a bit of technology or we have to introduce a new system. That's a planned change. Where do we fail in those things? Where we're not communicating to all of the stakeholders. We're not preparing the stakeholders. We're not, telling them what the benefits of the change would be. We're not having multiple mediums through which we are having these conversations. We can't just rely on, oh, we sent an email Everybody should know. No, right? We should have town halls, and we should have small group meetings and department meetings, and send the email out as well, and send out the flyers, send out, find out how people are feeling, poll them, get more involved and get all of the stakeholders involved in the change as much as is practically possible. I find that can help to prevent some of the resistance to change. Because, of course, it's a natural response, right? You always have your early adopters. They don't need a lot of information. They're like, let's go. They're the ones who are going to champion it and run with it. Let's do it. Then you have your slow adopters who are, I need a little bit more information. And then, okay, I'm on board with you now that I understand what you're doing. And then you have the people who just resist, right? Like, I don't care what information it is. I'm not moving. I don't like it, right? And then, there's different ways that you would have to deal with persons like those as well, right? But you have to understand that these people exist in your organization, and you can't expect to just dominate people and intimidate and browbeat people into change. It's not going to work. So those for me are the two critical barriers to transformation happening. I think the third one for me would be a lack of clarity about the transformation itself. What is it that you really want to change? Because sometimes we're not as clear as we can be about what's really the problem. And I can give you an example from a learning and development perspective, for instance, as people would engage me we need training, right? We need training in customer service, right? And so the consultant in me will always ask them some questions, right? I'm just going to say, okay, how many people, what day, what time, how many hours? To me, those are the questions that you ask at the end. The questions you ask at the beginning is, why do you need this training? What are some of the pain points that you're experiencing right now? A lot of times, training may not be the solution. That's not the transformation that you may need initially. I'll give you an example. A person approached me from a medical office many years ago and said the very same thing. We need customer service training. So I started to ask her the very questions. What's going on in the environment? What's happening? And she started to go on about all the things that were happening in the environment. We've had people who worked here for years and this and that. And then she said something that really stood out to me. She said, well, the people are disgruntled because they haven't had a pay raise in about 15 years. I said, bingo. Customer service training may not help you very much if these people are unhappy about their compensation over a long period of time. 15 years? So if they're unhappy, they're probably not going to be very happy with your customers. So you probably need to address that issue, right? Yeah, maybe your customer service does need transformation, but so does your organization and how you're treating your staff. So what is it that we're going to focus on first?
Do you need more psych health and safety in your life? Then head over to the FlourishDX Academy for several free on-demand e-learning courses. If you're an internal professional, follow FlourishDX on Eventbrite to register for any of our free fortnightly interactive webinars. Our flagship professional practice program is also exclusively available for internal professionals. The 12-week course blends theory, applied practice, and interaction with other professionals through live lectures and a monthly community of practice session. Find out more about all these learning opportunities or inquire about a bespoke in-house training at the FlourishDX Academy. www.45003.org. Now back to this episode.
Yeah, that's a perfect example of how an environment that is not that doesn't feel comfortable and doesn't feel safe and doesn't feel supportive impacts customer service, because there's, a lot of organizations, they focus a lot on, well, what do the customers think? What do the customers think? What do the customers think? And they skip over, what do the providers think? Because, and again, I am one of those, and I make no bones about it. The customer is not always right, and they're not the priority. They're not. They're not. As a leader, they're just not. The primary focus is on the people that I've brought. So there's a business and there's an employer. If you don't do the employer part, you won't be a good business very long either. I have a business, but it's just me. But when I involve other people, then I have to focus on them, and they are going to help me build the business. And part of the business is interacting with customers. So again, I think people just skip over that part, and they think that the people that I've brought in are simply interchangeable cogs, and I can find another one. Well, you're right, you can, but do you want to pay the price of that? Do you want to go? So do you now want to spend the 6 months to a year, maybe 2, it's going to take to replace the person who just left because you didn't value what they brought to the table? You didn't listen to them. You didn't treat them fair. You didn't pay them appropriately. So again, you saved a little money by not paying them, but you wasted it all by having to recruit somebody new. So you really haven't solved anything if you think about it objectively, and you've not transformed. You're simply what you always were. So you have the same problems. You have the same things that go on from month to month and year to year and decade to decade. And then you hire a consultant or something and you expect them to bring a magic wand and fix it, and they can't. They just can't.
Because it goes back to the first one that I mentioned, unless you are willing to completely change, right? It's not just change these people. You are a part of these people. You're a part of it, and so you have to be willing to, what are the things that's going to have to shift in the organization, in the way we work, or in our approaches, or how we communicate. That's everybody. And so everybody has to be bought into it in order for us to see that happen. So you're right. You'll never see the changes that you really want to see if your turnover is high, or you don't believe in developing people, or you don't believe in onboarding people effectively, right? Telling people what they need to know up front. In the organization, all of those things have a tangible result at the end of the day. And our customers feel it, internal customers and our external customers.
Yes. So tell me, in those cases where you have either seen, read, experienced, where there actually is transformational leadership, how do you think that kind of leadership contributes to the psychological health and safety environment of the organization?
Oh, it makes people just thrive and flourish, and you see it in the excitement that people have, the level of engagement. In HR, we call it the discretionary effort, meaning what people will do above and beyond what they're being paid for. That's when you see the benefit of transformational leadership. And what's interesting is that you can see it in pockets in some organizations. Why? Because you may have a departmental leader or a divisional leader who is transformational. And then so you see the impact in their area. But it's amazing that it's like a standalone and they're surrounded by everything else, right? The toxicity and the negativity and all of these other things. And so then you'll find, well, people are always trying to transfer into this department, or, what's going on over there? Like, why is everybody trying to get over there? And it's really because of the way that people are being led, right? And what they're being allowed to do, to be allowed to contribute. We see it in some of our brands around the world, in hospitality, etc., where the more, and I don't like to use this word empower, because to me it implies that we're giving people power, But the more we allow people to use their power, the more actually you see benefits in not only in their engagement and the morale, but you also see improvements in customer service. So, for instance, in the hospitality environment, when people are given, for instance, a resolution matrix, for instance, say I work on the front desk of a hotel, or I work in a restaurant, I'm a server in a restaurant, and I know this is my sandbox here. So if a customer has an issue, I am free to resolve their issue in the best way that I see fit within these parameters using this matrix, right? So if I'm a server and this person says, well, I wasn't satisfied with my entree, I know within my sphere of control that I can perhaps offer them a complimentary beverage. I can maybe offer them a complimentary dessert. I can perhaps take 10% off their bill. I don't have to run to my manager and ask them that, right? I don't have to ask for permission or to defer. And so, of course, when you can handle things in the moment, you know, the guest feels now, or the client, whoever, they feel like, wow, okay, I'm getting my issue resolved right away. And the person feels I've been empowered to use my initiative to take control of this situation because I can handle this situation. I don't need to call my manager because I know what to do. And I've been given the freedom to do it. And so that takes transformational leadership because you have to be able to trust your team, trust their expertise, trust their abilities to decide, trust them to use initiative and make right decisions. And guess what? If they make a mistake, then it's a development opportunity. Let's have a conversation about this. Let's talk about what you did. Step 1, step 2, step 3. And okay, step 4 was a bit shaky. How could we work on step 4, right? Technically, this is what our policy says. What do you think about the policy? What do you think about this part of the process, right? And engaging people's minds. We're not robots just showing up to be paid and to just do this and follow these rules. And we are human beings coming to exist and coexist in an environment with you.
Wow. 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 That's just such a wonderful couple of concepts that, you're mentioning. People being able to use that discretionary time to do things that they feel good about it. And that's what I would describe as emotional engagement as well. I'm so engaged that I've got the free time and my decision is to do something a little bit extra. I'm not being paid for it, but I want to do it because I think it's the right thing to do at the time. And I know the organization supports me. I know my supervisor supports me. I'm not going to get yelled at because I, strayed off the path a little bit.
Exactly. I know people who have gone out and got flowers because they wanted to decorate the environment. People who have gone out and gotten a custodial staff who would go and use their own money to buy air freshener for the restroom, right? And other people would tell them, well, you would do that for this big company, you know what you make and all that. But no, I have pride in what I'm doing. And they may not give it to me, but I want when people walk into the areas that I am responsible for, that they have a great experience. Teachers do it. How many times do teachers go into their own pockets to buy kids lunch or buy their supplies or buy certain things that they want to embellish what they're teaching, what the school's not providing or the curriculum is not showing, right? It happens all the time with people who you say are emotionally engaged, providing that discretionary effort. I will go above and beyond because I believe in this. I believe in what you're doing, and I believe in what I'm doing and how I am contributing to the environment.
So if you, as we, start to conclude our conversation, if you And I don't want you to give it all away. But if you could give maybe one or two things that an organization could do to become limitless, what does that look like? I know it's a pretty broad question, but if there's a couple of steps that an organization could take, we want to become limitless. What are the first couple of things we should be thinking about?
I think you will have to think about, where can we take the limits off? Or where can we loosen up some of the limitations that we ourselves have put on the organization, right? And sometimes, sometimes it falls at the seat of HR because some policies are limiting, right? And we need our policies. We love our policies, right? We got to have them because they provide guidance, they provide a standard. But what if that policy or that process is actually limiting us rather than freeing us, right? So looking deeply in the organization, and in some ways, this may impact your actual belief system, your core values of who we are, who we present ourselves to be. Sometimes we have to revisit those values and see, where have we been limiting ourselves even in these values, right? Like, a lot of people love to use team and family and innovation and all of these things, but are we really? Where are we putting limits on ourselves? And now, can we commit to creating a new way of thinking, communicating, working, interacting with each other, right? That means then we have to be intentional about the change, because now we've created an environment that people already believe, whether that's positive or negative. So if you're coming at me now talking about we're a family, I'm looking at you like, remember that old show? What you talking about, Willis? Right?
Right.
I don't trust you
Right.
because I know what the reality is, right? And so you have to be committed to being in the trenches, to sell this whole concept of being limitless in this area, whatever that may be. You may recognize that, you know what? Communication is high on our priority list. It's on our values, but we're not really communicating well. We don't have honest communication, or maybe it's harsh, or maybe we're in meetings and we're asking for feedback and no one's giving us any feedback. There's something wrong with communication in our organization. And so that means then that in order to make those incremental changes to be limitless in your organization, you're going to have to create the environment for people to feel comfortable in communicating in this style, in this way, when now it seems to be counterculture, because the culture is dictating something that's not on the wall. And I like to say it's on the wall, those concepts that we have on the wall, that mission, vision, core values that don't seem to make it off the wall.
Right. Right.
So to recap, I would say identify where are the limits, and then be committed and intentional about taking those limits off. And sometimes it means challenging some things that you hold dear, right? I hear a lot of people talk a lot about, let's use dress code for an example. Someone like me as a senior HR leader, look at my hair, right? This would probably not be considered professional in many environments, right? It's natural, it has color in it, it doesn't have a certain look that may be polished, right? And so that could be considered a limit, because now you're limiting me and what I can contribute based on your preference of a hairstyle. So you see how we can, right? put those limits on in very simple ways, but that can deeply impact someone's ability to feel authentic and to feel comfortable and free to contribute.
Right, right. Okay. Well, I got to stop it there because there are people who need to hear more about this, but they don't get to hear it all on this podcast. I'm just saying. So if people want to learn more, they want to chat with you more about this idea of becoming transformational, of becoming limitless. What's the best way to get a hold of you and have more conversation if they want to do that?
Sure, they can reach out to me on my website, which is www.leadwithsimmone, SIMMONE.com, or you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook. I don't go on X much, but I do have a presence. Even on TikTok. But the website, email, LinkedIn, you'll get me very quickly. And you can set up a discovery call. We can talk about what your challenges may be and what possible solutions exist and how I can help.
Absolutely. Well, Simmone, thank you very much. I rather enjoy being one of your LinkedIn followers, and you have a real flair for saying really interesting things and actually very visually appealing ways too, because you see a very good, your graphics and whatnot are just always very cool. Always very cool. But it's the substance of trying to help people take the limits off themselves. I mean, and some of these they just picked up over the years and they don't work for you anyway. So why not try something a little bit different? So again, thank you very much for sharing. And folk, y'all need to call Simmone. She can help you. I'm just saying, help you be limitless. Help you be limitless.
Thank you so much. Thank you for the opportunity.
Absolutely. So if you're watching or listening to this podcast for the first time, welcome. I hope something that you've heard will bring you back to a future episode. Previous episodes of the podcast can be found at psychhealthandsafetyusa.com. You can watch, like, subscribe, and share the podcast on the Flourish DX YouTube page. And you can join the Psych Health and Safety USA movement by connecting and becoming a subscriber on LinkedIn. So until next time, please stay tuned and look out for the next episode of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. Tune in each week for new episodes of the Psych Health and Safety USA podcast. If you have a story or know of one that needs to be told, reach out to us on LinkedIn or send an email to david@id2-solutions.com or go to the Flourish DX website at flourishdx.com. We'll see you next time.